Before we start, I'd like to point out that afterwards I will be doing a short Q&A. So if you want to get your questions in before I will also be that the questions will be separate. Also, during tonight, you will have the opportunity to win a star prize, which is a copy of Death and Butterflies and its companion, Blood and Beetles. That's the star prize. The runner-up will win a copy of this here fabulous book containing my story, Death and Butterflies. All you've got to do to enter is answer either, right? Because we were just going to go with the first question, which is, what bug creeps you out the most? But people like myself who love insects, that it doesn't really apply to. So I've come up with another question for the pro bug people, the bug lovers. If you could be a bug, which bug would you be? So all you've got to do to be in with a chance of winning is to answer that within 24 hours, and then it will be chosen out of a hat and you will get your copies. Excellent. So without further ado, I will crack on with my story. So yes, this is the Metamorphosis cube from Death and Butterflies. And the story starts with a quote from the Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce. House, noun, a hollow edifice erected for the habitation of man, rat, mouse, beetle, cockroach, fly, mosquito, flea, bacillus, and microbe. Anything with more legs than a dog or cat was a complete anathema to Rebecca Brown. Ever since she was a child, she possessed a strong and violent revulsion for creepy crawlies of all shapes, colours and sizes. Even a pretty little ladybird would elicit an extreme reaction from the young estate agent. Rebecca's dislike partially stemmed from an incident that took place on a family holiday in Australia. She was playing in the spacious garden with her two brothers when she desperately needed to answer a call of nature. She raced across the lawn to the dunning. She rushed inside and slammed the door, hitched up her floral summer frock, dropped her drawers and lifted the lid. Her parents had diligently drummed the importance of checking the seat for unwelcome visitors into a young head, and it was a good job too. Sitting under the seat with its forelegs raised and its fangs primed was the biggest brute of a spider she had ever seen. Rebecca fled the wooden outhouse, screaming blue murder with a frillies around her ankles. If that incident alone wasn't enough to put her off bugs for life and give her arachnophobia to boot, then the endless parade of beetles and woodlice that her brothers popped down her dresses certainly did. It wasn't just a phobia of scuttling things with many legs that led Rebecca to terminate them with extreme prejudice. It went beyond that, far beyond. Rebecca seemed to take a perverse pleasure in killing creepy crawlies that bordered on the sadistic. Crushing their tiny bodies made her feel omnipotent, like a god. If she was in a particularly foul mood, she would actively seek out the lurking creatures, then batter them into oblivion with the slipper that she kept especially for the job. Most people grow out of the impulse to pull legs off spiders and wings off flies when they get older, but not Rebecca. Few things alleviated the tensions and frustrations of her busy life like taking a magnifying glass to a line of ants or a pair of scissors to a big juicy worm. Rebecca was good at her job and made a small fortune on commission alone. So when it came time for her to buy her own house, she set her sights on something grand. She desired an escape from the city of Truro. She spent most of her days stuck in the city's traffic, dealing with its often frustrating denizens and showing them around various dilapidated properties. She had seen enough houses in Truro and knew enough of the myriad problems to know that she wanted something a little more rustic. A few months of searching, she found the perfect place, a barn conversion on the outskirts of a small town called Bettles Cove. It was close enough to Truro that getting to work wouldn't be a problem, and due to certain circumstances, the price was more than favourable. The house had, until recently, been the home-come studio of a talented yet troubled artist. The artist had tragically taken his own life earlier in the year, and none of the superstitious locals would touch the now haunted house with a barge pole. Rebecca had no fear of ghosts, especially when a large saving could be made, and she snapped the property up in a flash. After moving in, she found the property to her liking, and a great improvement over the shoebox she had previously rented above, ironically a shoe shop. There was one problem, however. The place was simply teeming with life. Insect life. She should have expected it. The house was ancient and situated in the middle of a dense patch of woodland, so it was bound to play home to a wide variety of creatures. Rebecca's dislike of bugs reached an all-time deadly high as she took it upon herself to attempt single-handedly to exterminate all bug life in the area. Rebecca deployed all of the killing devices at her disposal. She installed UV lamps that zapped moths and flies. The house was regularly doused and attacked with an array of sprays and powders, bleach and heavy-duty vacuum cleaners. She even took an electric tennis racket device outside on sunny days and hunted down any delicate butterfly that dared to trespass on her property. But nothing gave her more pleasure than the slipper of doom. She had possessed it since childhood. Her holocaust had been so merciless and successful that after a month of her brutal purge, the spacious barn conversion was free of any signs of life except her own. There was not a cobweb to be seen, and she had installed fly screens and sealed up every gap in the plaster that she could find. The slipper still took up pride of place under the coffee table, however, just in case. One Saturday morning in late September, the day after her 26th birthday to be precise, Rebecca was sleeping off the impromptu party her colleagues had thrown for her when a persistent knocking on the door broke her slumber. Every knock hammered into her delicate skull and sent her guts sloshing like a wave tank. She managed to call out a weak, "Just a minute," then slipped out of bed. Her legs had turned to jelly, and she stumbled around dizzily before locating and throwing on a bright pink dressing gown. She shuffled mechanically through her living room to the front door. Standing at the door, wearing a big, breezy smile on his ruddy features, with the low sunlight reflecting off his bright red jacket, was Harry, the local postman. "Morning, Miss Brown," he grinned. "Have a good night last night?" "Ugh," Rebecca groaned, "from what I can remember." "Any occasion, or just Friday night fever?" Harry chuckled loudly enough to send barbed wire pains shooting through Rebecca's head. "It was my birthday yesterday, and some of the guys from work dragged me out clubbing." She whined, deeply regretting going along with her plan without more of a fight. "I should have just come home and ordered a pizza." Harry laughed. "Here," he said, handing her a square package. "I need you to sign for this, then you can go back to bed." Rebecca took the box and looked at it, slightly puzzled. She didn't recall ordering anything online recently. She shrugged and attempted an impressively shaky signature on the touchscreen device Harry held in his outstretched hand. After bidding Harry a weary good morning, she gently shut the door and shuffled over to the sofa. Before opening her surprise parcel, she gave it a tentative shake. It sounded and felt solid and heavy. She reached for a pair of nail scissors and began to slit the sticky tape that held the parcel together like a cocoon. She peeled away the plain brown wrapping paper to reveal another layer of paper. This paper screamed "Happy Birthday" at her in an explosion of garish colours that made her jaded eyes sting. Between both layers of paper was a rectangular envelope emblazoned simply with her name in a distinctively crabbed script. Putting the box aside for a moment, she tore over the envelope with her chipped red nails. Inside was a high-quality glossy card. It didn't have any of the expected age jokes or jokes about drunken women. What it had on it made her blood boil. The card was simply a beautifully shot picture of a ladybird. Whoever sent the package obviously didn't know her very well. The card simply read, "Happy birthday, Rebecca. Wishing you good luck in your future endeavours. A.E." This asked more questions than it answered. Rebecca racked her aching head, but for the life of her, she couldn't figure out who A.E. was. None of the people in her life had those initials. They were written clearly enough on the card so as not to have been mistaken for any other letters. Her only thought was that it must have come from a client that she had wrangled a good deal for. Rebecca placed the card face down on the coffee table, hiding the pretty insect, and turned her attention to the mystery present. She tore up the paper, curious ferocity, then sat back, mouth agog, and examined the gift within. Her puzzled expression deepened as she gazed at what appeared to be a bizarre paperweight. The object was a precise cube carved from a rock as black as night. The obsidian cube shone with the reflected light from the French windows. It was inscribed with strange symbols and glyphs. It looked like the sort of curio usually found in New Age shops. She placed the item on the table and swept her scraggly brown hair into a bun before returning to bed. Rebecca dreamt of that filthy outside toilet in Australia. The spider glared at her with cold, accusing eyes. It knew she was a murderer and had appointed itself as judge, jury, and executioner. With alarming velocity, the eight-legged avenger sprung from its hiding spot and landed on Rebecca's dress. It quickly climbed her small frame and sunk its vicious, poison-tipped fangs into Rebecca's jugular. Her white frock turned deep crimson, and she woke up screaming. Few things are as intense as alcoholically induced nightmares. Rebecca was soaked in pungent sweat, her hair plastered to her pale cheek. She sat up and gulped thirstily at the bottle of water she kept next to the bed. Her mouth felt like the inside of a birdcage. Her saliva was congealed and sticky and clung to the back of her throat like a stubborn membrane. Every sound is somehow amplified when you're hungover, and a strange shuffling sound set Rebecca's teeth on edge. She swung her head over the side of the bed and peered below. The sudden movement sent the blood rushing to her head and the room spinning. What she saw pumped a hefty dose of adrenaline through her veins. Under the bed were hundreds and hundreds of cockroaches. The hissing, scuttling horde scuttled over her clothes and shoe boxes. Rebecca jumped out of bed and raced into the living room. She grabbed the slipper with purpose. She hesitated just a moment. She could have sworn that the strange cube was glowing. She shook her head to clear the cobwebs and shot back into the living room. Racing into the room, her blood pumping with fury and sadistic glee, Rebecca easily shoved the lightweight bed aside and brought the slipper down hard. With a piercing cry of, "Come here, you little bastards," she thrashed at the small creatures. The rest of the bugs started to scatter, presenting a moving target. She brought the slipper down again and again. Every sickening splat meant more squished carapaces. Rebecca was in a frenzy like a shark that smells that distinctive copper tang of blood. She thundered the slipping down like a woman possessed, but it didn't seem to be of any use. For every cockroach she killed, another two took its place. Eventually, she found herself surrounded by a hissing mass of bugs. The roaches swarmed around her, clicking their mandibles in anger. They started to crawl up her arms and legs. Rebecca slapped and pawed at them, trying to shake them free from her person. Letting out a shriek of fright, Rebecca stood and turned to flee, but her bare foot slipped on a pile of squished cockroach goo, and she pitched forward and smashed her head on the doorframe. Everything went black. Opening her eyes slowly, Rebecca was surprised to find herself in a long, dark tunnel. The walls on one side were stone and the other made of timber. The roof wasn't high enough to stand, so Rebecca picked a direction and started to crawl. Crawling was easier than she remembered, and she quickly made it to one end of the tunnel. A sharp, rhythmic click. alerted her to danger. The noise was joined by many more, seemingly in response. Fright glued her feet to the floor as she tried not to alert whatever was stalking her to a present location. Dim, diffused light poured from a crack or join in the wooden wall, revealing a corner up ahead. As panic surged through her body, the wriggling silhouette of two gigantic antennae appeared on the far wall. She watched in horror as a cockroach came shuffling around the corner, a gigantic cockroach. The creature was the size of a small car and hissed in fury as it spotted her. Quickly, she turned and started to crawl for her life in the opposite direction. She made it halfway when she noticed that directly in front of her, another cockroach blocked her path. It just sat there, staring at her, clicking its mandibles menacingly. The one behind her kept coming, so she had to keep heading in its direction. As she was nearly sandwiched, she noticed a crack in the wall. The cockroaches were herding her towards it. With much effort, Rebecca managed to pull herself through the narrow gap and landed on her back on a soft surface, a carpet. She looked around in utter bewilderment. She was in a bedroom, and it was huge. No, it was her that was small. The tunnel had been the skirting board, and the crack had been a join that she must have missed on her rampage. As Rebecca tried to get up, she was horrified by the sight of her legs, all 6 of them. They wriggled frantically as she arched her back and righted herself. She hissed in despair as she made the horrible realization that she, Rebecca, was now a filthy little cockroach. As she shuddered and panicked and tried to desperately think, a looming shadow spread across the room and eclipsed the light. Rebecca gazed in horror at the monster that stood above her. It was Rebecca. The human Rebecca's eyes danced with an evil malevolence, a sick smile on her lips. In one hand, she clutched the slipper and playfully slapped it against her other. Rebecca the cockroach looked desperately for a hiding spot, somewhere dark and secluded where she could hide from this towering monster. Human Rebecca quickly closed in and was standing directly above her. "Come here, you little bastard," she cried. The vocal cords were unmistakably hers, but the voices weren't. Thousands upon thousands of insectoid and arachnid voices burst forth from her mouth. These were the voices of the dead, the murdered and exterminated, and they wanted revenge. Rebecca the cockroach made a desperate dash for the skirting board, but her fellows wouldn't let her through the gap. They barred her escape and reveled in what came next. With a swift and decisive motion, Rebecca flattened Rebecca with her well-worn slipper. Nobody ever saw Rebecca after that day. The police searched and searched, but her body was never found. Though local children have reported seeing a dishevelled woman in a filthy pink dressing gown scurrying around in the undergrowth of the local woods, their parents have dismissed it as poppycock. The end. Thank you. Okay, before I start the Q&A, I'm just going to get up. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to bring up a second laptop so I can see the watch party so I can answer questions there too. Won't be a moment. Okay, let's see if there's any Jitterbug the song. That freaks you out. That's David Green. I like that. Yeah, it is a bit unnerving, I must admit. Okay, so let's just scroll down here and see if there are any questions. Okay, that's just, there's no actual questions. Anyway, right, so that story, the Metamorphosis Cube, I wrote specifically for that anthology, the Death and Butterflies anthology, and yeah, I just had I just always had the idea of, you know, turning somebody into a cockroach. I didn't actually think about it until recently, but I remembered a scene in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 when the girl Debbie, I think it is she hates bugs. So in her nightmare, Freddy turns her into a cockroach, and she goes into one of them roach motels. You know, and then he squashes her. So that must have been lurking in my subconscious. I certainly didn't think about it at the time I wrote it. But okay, I'm just gonna try and find the watch party. I don't actually know why she's doing it. There we go. Yeah. Okay, we're good. Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Andy. Thanks, David. Oh, goodness. That's me talking. This is going well, isn't it? Yeah, David loves the props. Yeah, good. I don't know what made me do it. I just thought it'd be fun. Yeah. Yeah, so if nobody has any questions, I will start wrapping this up. But before I do start any of that, if I do start any before I start wrapping it up, sorry, I've just got to tell you that Death and Butterflies hit its companion piece, Blood and Beetles, came out last week, or the week before, one of which. Anyway, you can get both of them. If you want to get Death and Butterflies, just type in getbook.at / Death and Butterflies. For Blood and Beetles, which incidentally I'm not actually in, it's getbook.at / Blood and Beetles. And like I say, to be in with a shout of winning both of them, all you've got to do is answer either what bug creeps you out the most, or if you could be a bug, which bug would it be? I know my answer. My answer is Weevil. Because, get this, if you're a Weevil, you get to live in a nice fluffy biscuit, you know, like not the American biscuit, like a shortbread or something. Live in the little holes, and you wouldn't even have to get out of bed to eat. Perfect. Yeah, so all you need to do is answer those questions if you want to be within a shout. Oh, don't worry, Archer. I mean, it's he says he turned up late. That's not a problem. It'll be up on my thing from now on. So just rewind. You've got 24 hours to answer that question anyway. Anybody who listens now, they've got 24 hours to answer that to be in with a shout of winning. See any questions? So I will wrap it up. Hang on. Okay, Katie Tate. I should audition to read for the other stories. I have no idea what that is, but I would love to audition for something like that. It sounds like the sort of thing I'd really enjoy. So, yeah, great. Yeah, send me a link or something. Yeah, definitely a credit to the Northwest, David. Damn right. Macclesfield and proud. Am I afraid of bugs? No, not at all. No, yeah. Andy asks if I'm afraid of bugs. I'm not in the slightest. I love them. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to breed, you know, the Australian Maclay Spectre stick insect, the big ones that look like chunks of wood. I mean, the females have got tails like scorpions. They look like brambles, you know, like a bramble bush or whatever. And the males are smaller, thinner, and they've got wings. I used to breed them for a local pet shop. I also used to breed the Indian, you know, your standard Indian snake. I used to also have a red-kneed Mexican tarantula called Boris. I love creepy crawlies. For instance, If you look, I don't know if anybody could see it because it's quite a dark back here, but my friend Goliath's been joining me tonight. He's a plastic grasshopper. I went all buggy behind me today, but I don't think you can actually see it because of the gloom. But never mind. Okay. Yeah, the locations. It is my. I've created my own milieu, Bettles Cove, which there's also the village of High Bend, Hollow Hills, and various other places like manor houses and things like that. It's what I created in. I've created in Cornwall, and it's where I set most of my stuff. I mean, there's threads through a lot of my stories. I mean, for instance, that you won't know from reading that who AE is, but if you read some of the other stuff, you will get it. You see, I'm such a complete fanboy of Lovecraft. But I actually, when I was starting out, I was reading Ramsey Campbell's correspondence that he had with August Derleth from Arkham House. You know, and it was when he was trying to get Inhabitants of the Lake published, and he'd written most of these stories, but he'd set them all in Arkham and Innsmouth and Dunwich and even Dean's Corners, Kingsport, these little places. But Derlis said, "Look, I mean, you're from Liverpool. I mean, have you ever been to New England? Have you ever been to Massachusetts?" And Campbell hadn't. So he basically said, "Look, just go off, create your own thing, create your own milieu, create your own old one, create your own thing." And I've kind of done that myself. I mean, I've created my own old one, the Parasite God, which appeared in the last two and this one. To be fair, but yeah, so yeah. I mean, I base a lot of my stories, locations, and the people in them on real locations and people I know. I mean, that absurdity of sort of. I mean, I'm a massive fan of the absurd sort of Python-esque look of Great Britain. It's all fish slapping dance and weird rites and silly walks and. But if you look anywhere, there's absurdity. I mean, I mean, seriously. I mean, I get most of my ideas by just going shopping, and I'll just see somebody doing something, and I just think that's really kind of bizarre. So I'll write a story about it. So I guess that's where a lot of that kind of stuff comes from. Is yeah, the Mendees mythos. Cheers, Joel. Yeah, it basically a lot of them. I have been stealthily building it. I don't know if anybody had actually realised, but I have been putting it together sort of covertly, you know. Yeah. No, I don't think I have changed that much, Suze. I mean, I haven't actually seen you in about 15 years or something, but I don't think I've changed that much. I've got a portrait in the attic. Uh, I live in a block of flats. uh, yep, a handy slipper. Let's check over here. I think. Yeah, I think that'll do now for questions on the live thing. But if you carry on asking them on the watch party, which is obviously behind this, uh, this is live. That isn't. Um, if you carry on asking questions, and like I say, get in your answers to them questions if you want to be in with a shout of winning the books. I mean, it's easy. Just tell us what freaks you out or what bug you want to be. Um, yeah. And before I go, I would just like to just where is the copy? Yeah. As you can see, I really like the cover. I mean, the artwork that Scott Savino did for it is, I think that's how you say it, is really good. But I mean, I love that back cover as well. But my absolute favorite is, and I don't actually know who wrote it, though it is signed, but I can't read it. I love that pencil sketch of a bee. Just makes me want to stroke it. That's a really cute looking bee, man. Uh, yes. So, and if you enjoyed that, Please like it, comment, you know, the drill, share it if you want. In 2 weeks' time, so that will be the 15th of May, I will be doing another live reading. This time I will be reading my story, What the Butler Saw, from 2020, which is from Black Hair Press. Tune in, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's got a perverted butler, a randy old colonel, and a Lovecraftian horror. What more do you want? Like I say, thank you again for tuning in. And before I go, make sure to pick up a copy of Death and Butterflies. Again, that link is getbook.at/Death and Butterflies. If you want Blood and Beetles, it's getbook.at/Blood and Beetles. Okay. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it. I'll see you next time.